Hey folks, it's Jake here at Canadian Cutting Edge. We're into March already. I think the next video, I'll do a review and I'll let you know which Patreon winner or Patreon supporter is the winner for this end of month draw for the February draw that I do at the beginning of March. But I call it the you know what's going on, especially if you're a Patreon supporter. That was a distraction, wasn't it? Today we're taking a look at this. This is the TS130 by TwoSun. It comes with a black titanium TC4 handle, and you can either get a satin blade or you can get a black wash blade in M390. So this is not a super budget knife. It's a slip joint knife. It's got a basically classic kind of slip joint mechanism, slightly different than some. We've got a fuller in the blade here. We've got like a sheep's foot style handle, sheep's foot style blade front, handle that's got pocket clip that's right side tip up. And if you're looking for a nice slip joint, especially one with a strong stop point halfway across, it takes a lot of force to get it to close. If those are the kinds of things you like, or you're just curious, stick around. The full review's coming to you right now. Let's do a little size comparison between the Ontario Rat 1 and this knife. Let's get a little bit closer. So there's the full length of the Ontario Rat 1, and if we match up the pivot points here, it's a similar sized knife. The blade lengths, you get a little bit less, a very tiny little bit less steel on the new knife than you do compared to Ontario Rat. And if you measure where you can grip right here, along with this one, well, you've got a little bit of a forward grip there and a forward grip here. They're quite similar, actually. It's just that this is a smaller handle in pretty much every other dimension. Smaller depth, smaller thickness, but it's a nice knife. We've got a slip joint that is a back spring with a detent. So this back spacer here is the back spring. There's a pivot point right about there. And then this piece of steel coming out here that has the little tiny hole in it right there, and that bit of dripping on the top. It is the spring, it is the detent spring. So if you take a look at the knife here, you see this little round hole right there. This round head fits inside it. And so it's sliding along and sliding along, and you can see a little bit extra steel sticking out right here. When it comes in, this piece of steel pops down into that little bit of a recess there, and that's what holds it. So you have to use some force to push the blade away, which forces the spring in the opposite direction. And then we've got just a little detent right there, is just a little bit of a divot in the blade tang, and sliding along. And now it's in that little bit of a recess there, and that's what's holding the knife in this half stop position. And then when you go to close it, there's another spot, very much like the first one, and it slips in there, and that's what holds it in the closed position. So it doesn't open easily. If you try to open it a little bit, it's going to want to come back until you pass that point. Now, the only writing on this knife is right there. It says M390. M390's got a Rockwell hardness of around 61, give or take a little bit. There's the logo for Night Morning Design. And along the handle here, it says TwoSun. I like how that is a good size, but it's discreet because it doesn't stand out. They didn't make that white, the letters or anything. It's just a TwoSun knife. Like I mentioned before, you've got a forward choil here. There's jimping on the tang of the blade. And you've got jimping on this back spring. Now, if you're holding the knife like this, especially if you're putting some pressure on your thumb. That makes it even harder for the blade to get, start to get closed, because any pressure with your thumb on here makes it harder for that detent to let go. So if you're gripping it like this, you've got an awful lot of strength and safety and security to stop it from closing on your hand. And the other thing is, if you've got your finger up here by this jimping, your index finger, if you don't have anything else there, but you're starting to close the knife, that finger stops you from getting cut because it gets in the way and you can't close the blade because you've got pressure on the tang of the blade right there. So I like how this is made. It's both safe and it gets you closer to the cutting edge so you can do more delicate work. It's a very good design, and yet it's quite discreet and simple. We've got jimping along the spine of the blade back here, just for a little extra grip in the hand. Pocket clip is right side only, tip up position. And we've got two little, if you can see it this way right there. Hopefully that'll work on film here. Let's see if I'll get it this way to focus again. If you can see, there's two little feet on both sides of that pocket clip right there. Let's see what it looks like on a pair of pants. And I'll tell you what, it does go on and off a pocket very well. So here we go. You go to put it on. It's at the bottom. It's holding on just fine. It just works really well. So it's all black wash, hides quite well. You've got, a little, maybe a tiny bit more than a 1/4 inch of the knife sticking out there. About 6, 7 millimeters of the knife handle sticking out. Works very, very well. So I was talking about the blade. We've got a satin finish. It's a saber grind. It's not a full flat grind right to the top, because the ricasso here, the thickness of the steel, that stays the full thickness across the spine all the way along there. So it's a long, thick blade, a little over 1/8 of an inch thick. We'll do all the specs later on. The fuller just comes out the end, and it gives a cool kind of look to the tip of the blade. And I kind of like it. Strong tip of the blade, very strong. You can pry with it if you want to. I wouldn't. I don't recommend it, but you could. The fuller here is bead blasted, and then everything else is satin. You've got this forward choil, also acts as a sharpener's choil. Nice plunge there. It's a nice clean job that they did with sharpening this blade. Although, I'll talk about it a little bit later, the angles that they ground the blade to at the final grind there, they're quite different one from the other, but we'll cover that in just a minute. I think I said in the intro, this is titanium TC4 is what they say that it is. And there's not very many reviews of this knife out there. I think it's a really good choice, especially for somebody who's looking for a good slip joint knife, especially if you like strong detents, like strong, it holds tightly and you have to push fairly hard to get it to go. And then another stop point there. I used my knife cutting system, where you measure how much force it takes to cut through a piece of filament, to see how much force it takes to make the knife start to close. And this knife takes roughly 1.5 kilograms of force to start to close the blade. That's a fair bit. Like a little knife like, well, here, let's do this one. A knife like this one, this is a San Renmu knife. It's a slip joint. The 9165, that takes 1/3 as much. I do like a little bit less force than what the TwoSun knives require you to use, but there is a positive to, the amount of force that you need to use on these TwoSun knives, and that is it's not going to close easily on you. One other con for this knife is, and I've noticed this on a number of TwoSun knives, is the pivot screws, since they don't use any Loctite or anything, they come loose during use. And this guy's been loosening off during use. The first couple days when I used it, everything's nice and snug. There's no blade play side to side. But after a little while, I noticed that screw starting to come loose. And that's why I strongly recommend using something like Vibratite VC3 Thread Mate. I don't like using traditional Loctite. I like using VC3 Thread Mate because it's actually designed to have you undo the screws and retighten it, 6-7 times before it wears out and you have to reapply the Thread Mate. Whereas Loctite, it's once and done kind of thing. Works really well. So let us now pull out our trusty little measuring tape here and use that as a symbol to designate the fact that we are now going to be going over all the specs and dimensions on this knife. The weight of this knife is 111 grams, 3.9 ounces. And the length of the cutting edge right here is 2.8 centimeters. That's 3.23 inches. So basically 3¼ inches of cutting edge. The blade length, so tip to the closest spot of titanium that you can reach, 9.17 centimeters, 3.61 inches. The blade thickness all the way along the spine here, 4.37 millimeters, which is 0.172 of an inch. That's 11/64 thick, so that's a good thickness, well over 1/8 of an inch. The blade depth, this dimension, 2.03 centimeters, which is 0.8 of an inch. The thickness of the edge behind the grind, and I usually measure about 1 inch up from the sharpener's choil, 0.52 millimeters, that's 20/1000ths of an inch. Not bad at all. That's very close to what I really want to see on these knives. Now for the grind angle, let's see if I get it right. Yep, this side here, the grind angle is 17.2 degrees. This grind angle is 24.8, so almost 25 degrees. So that means, if the blade's down center, coming right down, imagine putting an imaginary line straight through that space. One side is 17 and the other side is almost 25. So that's not quite even. You want it to be more like 18 degrees per side. M390 can handle being 18 degrees per side very well, no problem at all, or 17.5 even, which might be what I'll do this knife to if when the first time comes that it needs to be sharpened, I might just sharpen it down to 17.5 degrees per side. M390 is durable, it's strong, it holds an edge very well. It's not a super steel, but it's a premium steel. It's up there. I was going on this knife handle now. Measurements, 10.87 centimeters, which is 4.28 inches. Not bad at all. The grip area, and since you've got room on the blade here for grip, the grip area is roughly 11 centimeters, about 4.3 inches. The handle thickness, not counting the pocket clip, is 1.26 centimeters. That's 0.495, so ½ an inch thick. The handle depth is about 2 centimeters. That's 0.788 of an inch. And when you close the knife, the blade depth, or the whole knife depth, is biggest right here. 2.8 centimeters, 1.11 inches. And the total length of this knife when it's deployed is 20 centimeters. That's 7.874 inches. So almost 8 inches. A little over 4, a little under 4. That's a very good compromise. The balance point for this knife is right there. So it's a little bit back on the handle, which means that it's a nice light front of the knife. Easy for doing delicate work. And I like it quite a lot because you got the weight back here in your hand where you want it to be. Now, the price for this knife. Well, this knife is actually getting a little bit hard to find. It's listed at White Mountain Knives, but not in stock. So Justin over at White Mountain Knives sells this knife after your 10% discount for $83 and 69 cents? So, it's not a super cheap knife. Everywhere else I found it to be more, like on Amazon.com, it's $94.50, and that ships from Asia, probably China. AliExpress has it for $93 US. That ships from China. So wherever you're going to find it, it's going to cost a little bit of money. But I bought mine from eBay, and I bought it through an auction, and I think it was $41 and some odd cents US that I got it for. So if you get the timing just right on eBay, you can get a really good deal. You just know what the retail price is so that you know that you're not going to bid yourself into spending more than you really should spend. The unique features of this knife, I like that you've got jimping on that spring for the detent and jimping right there in the blade. So this area here, that's quite unique. You don't see it that often made this way, and it helps make the knife much more secure for use. We've got a built-in pocket clip, and it's functional. That's good. I like the black wash. I probably would like to get the black washed blade, but very hard to find the black wash blade in stock. At least it was for me on eBay. I like the nice fuller here. It's great for using it as a nail nick, essentially, to deploy the blade. Gives it a nice look as well. You got a nice sheep's foot front here, so the tip is very strong, but it's a fine tip, for doing more delicate work. It's got a good grind on it. I would have preferred if it had a stone wash grind, because, fingerprints. It looks good. The grind is done very well, evenly across there. Yeah, the cutting edge, the final grind, it's not perfect, but it's not bad. It's got a nice weight to it. And the cons are, for my personal taste, I would like the spring here to be a little bit weaker. I wouldn't mind having, to push on 2 pounds of pressure to make the knife start to close, but 3 pounds of pressure pushing on there, that's a little bit more than I need. So what do you think of this knife? What if you live in an area where you can have all the lock knives you want? Would you ever buy a slip joint knife? Well, I do, because I like slip joint knives, and I can have most kinds of locking knives if I want to. But slip joint knives, that's the kind of knife I started, my collection when I was young. My dad bought me a slip joint knife as my first knife, and that's what I got used to using, and I like slip joint knives. And this one's quite handy. It's got a good look to it, and it's a little bit special, and it's got good steel, and I got it for a really good price, at 41 something. So hopefully you can get yours at a good price. If you do shop at White Mountain Knives, make sure you use coupon code CCE at the checkout, and you can get 10% off anything that they sell and everything that they sell. And he's always got some good specials going. So thanks for watching my video. Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.